Well, Cade McNamara is back as the Iowa starter at quarterback. Does he have a chance to actually play well here in these final two games, including this week against Maryland? We break it all down today. Locked on Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. While you're there, hit the subscribe button as we push our way up the leaderboard here, trying to get up to 4,000. Just takes you a moment. If you're listening on the podcast side, 5-star reviews. It all helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and make sure you use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Well, yesterday the news became official. Cade McNamara is back as the Iowa football starter at the quarterback position. Brendan Sullivan lost for the regular season with that ankle injury. And we'll find out a little bit later today with the press conference from Kirk Ferentz, a little bit more, I'm sure, about the injury and the debilitating angle of it, what it means. What it does mean now is it's going to be Cade McNamara. And let's start at the front. You know, there's a lot of people after what we saw a couple of Fridays ago against UCLA. We saw Jackson Stratton thrust into action and put out there that, well, we wanted to see him, right? And I understand that sentiment. I understand that angle that you wanted something new. Cade McNamara, it has been a disappointment, to say the very least. His career in Iowa City has been short of delivering, I thought, what a lot of people's expectations were. And were those expectations out of line? Yes, they were, I think, for a lot of people. Remember, even in his best season at Michigan, when he won a Big Ten championship, won their first Big Ten title since 2004, this is still a guy that season that only threw 15 touchdowns. I think, and I'd throw myself into that group. I think my expectations were just too high for him as a quarterback. He's been competent. He's been able to complete a higher percentage of passes than quarterbacks that we've seen in the past. But for all intents and purposes, this guy's been bad for really what I think the thought process was going to be for him. And you look at the numbers. I thought this was pretty damning. These numbers from John Steppe from the Cedar Rapids Gazette, the Iowa beat writer. This is where he ranks Cade McNamara this season in the NCAA. Remember, there's 133 teams. Now, qualifying quarterbacks right now, there are 119 qualified quarterbacks that have played enough games and thrown enough passes this season. His quarterback rating, 115.8. All right, quarterback rating doesn't mean a whole lot when you're talking about what does that mean? It's hard to understand. You got the NFL rating, the college rating. They're completely different. 115.8. What's that mean? Well, it means he's 110th in the country out of 119 qualified quarterbacks at the FBS level. 110th out of 119. That's bad. Completion percentage, over 60% for an Iowa quarterback. That's pretty good. Put him around the other quarterbacks in college football, 83rd in the country out of 119. Yards per completion, pushing the ball down the field, 116th out of 119 quarterbacks, 9.8 yards per completion. Yards per attempt, 114th out of 119. Add it all up, you have a quarterback that's been bad. And have I fallen victim to overhyping Cade McNamara? Absolutely. That's bad on me. He's been damaged goods. The injuries, what he actually is as a quarterback, has not been there. Now, is he a better thrower than Brendan Sullivan? Is he more consistent? Does he not turn the ball over at the level that I think we'd see from a Brendan Sullivan? Probably. But he hasn't been good enough. I mean, there's no two ways about it. So can we see Cade McNamara here bounce back? Can he have a swan song, if you will, and give at least a little bit of good feelings as he walks out the door? Well, it starts this week against Maryland, and a Maryland team that is on a 3-game losing streak. This is what Maryland normally does. Get off to a good start, fall apart late in the season. This has been what Mike Locksley's group has done historically. And as you look at the numbers and you look at the matchup here for this Iowa passing offense, this is going to be yet another game that they're likely going to have to throw the football to win. Maryland right now is giving up 262 yards per game through the air. That is good enough for 122nd in the country. That's bad. But we've seen Iowa go up against past defenses that have been bad this season, and they haven't been able to deliver. This is a problem with the passing offense. And I don't think you can pin this solely on the new offensive coordinator. This can't just be Tim Lester's problem. It goes all the way around. This team's been really good run blocking. Pass blocking has been pretty good. But the wide receivers are pedestrian. Outside of Jacob Gill, we haven't seen anybody really step up in a big time way. I know we were excited about Race Vanderzee, but we saw even before the injuries that this is a guy still figuring things out, playing as a freshman. Outside of that, Jarrett Bowie, mm, Dayton Howard, okay. There's just not a whole lot there. The tight end position has been wrecked by injury this year. Luke Lachey was certainly not the Luke Lachey that we saw before the injuries when he came back at the beginning of the season, and he's been banged up. We know we've been without Addison Estrenga. So now you have a huge component to what Iowa wants to do in the passing game that has been nullified because of injuries, because of guys working their way back from injury, and it just hasn't been the same on that front. They don't do a whole lot in the screen game. It's something that I would continue to like to see them try to do more. Now, if you're building this offensive line as Iowa has with these more athletic guys, this is not the old Wisconsin offensive line, right? With the big 350-pound maulers up front. That's not what they are. You have guys that can move. And we see that in the zone blocking scheme and the improvement of the zone blocking scheme and some of the small differences that we've seen throughout the course of this season. Well, get those guys out there. Get them out in space. Give them an ability. Now, we always hear about a guy like Logan Jones and how athletic he is at the center position. Get him out there. Get him out in space. Connor Colby, guys like that, get him moving a little bit more. And I'd like to see the screen game be a bigger part of what they do offensively. Still, can Cade McNamara deliver against this one? This is the time to just let it fly, right? There's nothing to lose. 6-6, 8-4, it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. I mean, how many people are actually going to travel to this bowl game? The disappointment of the season, however it ends up, is going to be there. If you're heading to Charlotte, Tampa's a nice destination, Detroit, or anything in between, how many people are actually going to be traveling for this game? It's incredibly difficult to think that this is going to be one that we're going to see tens of thousands of Hawkeye fans traveling to. So let it fly. Cade, take some shots. Go down the field. Go one-on-one. Somebody's got to step, give them an opportunity. That's what I would love to see for Cade McNamara coming off the concussion is give them a chance. Because Maryland, rush defense 30th in the country. I mean, it sets up a lot. The other component that we go into this game against the Terrapins is Iowa's been terrible on the road. This has been a bad team on the road this season. Michigan State disaster. UCLA obviously fall apart after the first quarter. Ohio State, it was a non-compete. They fell apart in the third quarter and on and on and on. That's what you're getting with this Iowa team. Yes, Maryland's struggling, but as we've learned, and certainly in the Michigan State and the UCLA games, we have learned it really doesn't matter what these teams are. They're going to chuck it around, they're going to throw it around, and they're going to make plays on the field. That's another concerning aspect of some of the struggles that we've seen from this Iowa football team. That's where we are right now. It will be McNamara again. We'll get a little bit more. Jackson Stratton, I think we have to remember, had a couple of nice throws in that game. There's also a guy that was 417 at Colorado State, passing the football. It's a guy that was down the depth chart at Colorado State. The likelihood that he's going to turn into a Big Ten starter is very, very low. One more shot for Cade. That's what we're going to get on Saturday, 11 a.m. kickoff. Also, heads up, I'm going to be on WMT along with a couple of other stations, KXIC in Iowa City and over in the Quad Cities as well on the sports radio station there. I'll be doing the pregame show before the Learfield pregame show and also the postgame wrap-up with Marvin McNutt on those stations. 600 WMT, 800 KXIC, and over in the Quad Cities. You can hear that pregame and postgame on all of those stations, and I'm looking forward to that coming up on Saturday. Doug Wagner is going to be out this weekend. Apologies. Oh, everybody loves Doug. I'll be in sitting for him, though, this weekend with the matchup against the Terrapins. We continue here. Scott Dochterman from The Athletic. He's going to join us. We'll talk a little bit of Iowa football with Doc, Big Ten football as a whole with the man from The Athletic as we continue Locked On Hawkeyes. All right, Hawkeye fans, time to listen up. You need to download the Roy app. You've heard us talk all about Roy this season, how they're revolutionizing the NIL industry. Roy allows you, the fan, to have a say in who gets the NIL money. And here's what I love about Roy. You get your money back if that player transfers. How awesome is that? Knowing where your money goes, that is an important. And keeping it in the Hawkeye family, you can do that with Roy. Roy is helping keep our team intact, and it's actually good for the program long term. You can show your support for a guy like Caleb Johnson. After he put up that 3-touchdown performance, well, he's done it 3 times this year. You can deposit a little appreciation into that player's account. To do that, just download the Roy app, and you can see the logo that looks like, if you're watching us here on YouTube, you can see it right here, or just go to joinroy.com. Let's spotlight the Roy Locked On Player of the Week for this week. Well, if the Hawkeyes on the bye, we're going to go basketball this week, and Drew Thelwell is our Roy Locked On Player of the Week. We're going to throw some money into his account on Roy. Every contribution counts. 10, 20 bucks, it all adds up, and it's going to help keep our favorite players stay put. Join me and show some love for Drew Thelwell after the monster performance, the big 3-pointers late, and how about that defense in beating Washington State over in Moline. You can download the Roy app or go to joinroy.com today. Make sure you use that promo code. It's Locked On. Every athlete from every team is in there. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. Go to joinroy.com for full terms. Roy, support the players, change the game. Today's episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast is also brought to you by the Game Time app. I love the Game Time app, the ability to see everything going on. Basketball here. Talk about the big monster matchup against Iowa State coming up here in a couple of weeks. Here in the sneakers, here in the crowd. It is going to be a fun one, and you can get in on Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I love the ability to see exactly what you're paying for your tickets up front. Toggling the all-in pricing feature shows you that up front, no more surprise fees at checkout. Plus, the Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and make sure you use the code. It's Locked On College. That will get you $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On College. LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Now, Scott Dochterman joins us from The Athletic.
Right now, let's get to our friend Scott Dochterman. He covers Iowa, the Big Ten, college football, et cetera, for The Athletic. And Doc joins us. Doc, Trent, and Ken, thanks for coming on. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing?
Doing okay. Doing pretty well. Fascinating down the stretch here with 2 weeks left, trying to figure out all the tiebreakers, who's in, who's out. What did the weekend mean? Are the ACC and the Big 12 looking at one bid per conference? Going to be very interesting to see how it all plays out. But let's get to the news of this morning, Doc. And Brendan Sullivan is now going to miss the remainder of the regular season. Apparently, Cade McNamara has cleared concussion protocol, so he gets the keys to Tim Lester's offense. But pretty big news here on a Monday morning, pursuant to the Iowa quarterback position.
Yeah, it is big news. I mean, you kind of, it sounds, I mean, for Brendan Sullivan, it sounds worse than what it actually is. I mean, the regular season ends a week from Friday. So if it's like, this is the end of the regular season when that, I first saw it and subsequently heard about it. It's, I mean, if it was like 2 or 3 weeks out there, he might have a chance, but this is, it's a big development. I mean, Cade McNamara now steps in again and kind of reclaims his role, at least for the next week or two, and depending on what happens to his health going forward. And it's, if nothing else, I mean, he gets the engines running on time. I mean, Maryland is kind of in some ways a matchup opponent for Iowa, but we've seen that kind of backfire on the Hawkeyes a couple of times recently. But and then it remains to be seen what will end up transpiring for the bowl game. I mean, if Brendan Sullivan's healthy and if Cade's healthy, then I'm sure that there'll be some sort of switching around on that, but it is fascinating.
Disappointing angle to this for me, Doc, is just to see, can Brendan Sullivan be your guy that you're confident
is the starter in 2025. The concerns about him as a passer threw 2 interceptions in a start against UCLA, and now you won't get that. You had to bring in a guy at minimum, I think, to compete with him for the job, but now you're kind of robbed of that. How much more difficult does it make the offseason for Iowa football, knowing we don't have a real full snapshot here of Brendan Sullivan, and no, we got to go portal shopping, but how much are we going to be spending? We looking for a starter? We looking for kind of that next tier of guy to compete? It's going to make it more difficult, I believe, for Iowa football.
It's an important part of the evaluation that you won't receive. And it's probably, you'd say probably good that he did get the time that he did against UCLA before he had to leave, because otherwise, it was this sterling representation of what transpired in the, Wisconsin game. And then you saw, well, these are the reasons why Northwestern wasn't really fighting for him, that Iowa was, he wasn't starting in Iowa, is the things we saw, the negatives against UCLA. And that's probably what will enter into this equation, that to the coaches who do watch it every day, and as they tell us every single time they talk to us, that now you kind of see the fuller picture. Now, for Iowa, to me, I think there are 2 directions you go in. One, you just go guns blazing into getting a starter in the offseason. And then the other one is, if you think that Brennan provides you with a good starter next year, if that's what they believe, then you've got to go get one of those really quality backups in, say, the SEC or Big Ten or wherever, who is capable of starting for you maybe in 2 years and playing some next year. And the guy I would kind of reference that would be like Luke Altmaier, who was at Ole Miss, and he was good, but then they went and got Jackson Dart, and it was like, okay, they passed me up. He goes to Illinois, and he's had a really solid season.
For sure.
So I think Iowa's got 2 directions to go in there. And so it's going to be a really interesting couple of weeks as they get closer to the portal.
Doc, and forgive me if you don't know the answer to this, because with politics and sports, I just don't get into it. With what's going on in Washington with the NIL, et cetera, might this change the way this offseason goes, as far as players in the portal and how much they're going to be able to make in the portal? Do you know if that'll change the way things are done? And with the
yeah, that's a really good question, because I think most teams are progressing or moving forward with the belief that come July 1st that they're going to have X amount of dollars available to spend from within their athletics department. But that doesn't help the players from December through June 30th, and they're not going to say, well, I'm going to wait 6-8 months or whatever before I get a check. I mean, you're going to have to make sure to go out and pay for that, but it does impact them as to the future. And it's still kind of undetermined, because there has been a preliminary approval, but not a final approval, which really doesn't come until April. So I think, one more big time year for the Swarm, and then they can kind of figure out what the next step is. And it's not unique to Iowa, it's everywhere.
Right.
And so I think that's there is some uncertainty still, but there's hopefulness that it all be cleared up, or a lot of it be cleared up by July 1st.
Doc, it's a lost season. There will be no playoff. There will be no Big Ten championship game. You are what your record says you are. This is a 6-4 team. What is left to play for outside of pride the last 2 weeks here against Maryland and Nebraska?
This is the one thing that where we separate from the athletes, which is the athletes are the ones that get up at 5 a.m. and go work out, and they're in serious pain this time of year, and yet they want to win. It's all about the games. I mean, for the fans, we can, people or media, we can complain about there's nothing to play for. I mean, who cares if they go to the ReliaQuest Bowl or Charlotte or whatever. But for those who are in it, who are in the arena, this is what really matters. And going to Maryland matters to them. And to Jamari Harris going up against Ty Felton, that's a huge matchup for him. It could earn him some money. And then playing Nebraska at home. I mean, there's no bowl or there's no playoff bid at stake, but there's a lot of pride at stake, and pride matters to those athletes. So I don't know what the fans, that's up to them, how they approach the last 2 games. They can throw them away. They can complain, which is likely, But I think for the players themselves, there's a lot to play for, and there's a huge difference between going 8-4 and 6-6.
Caleb Johnson, put him in that equation that Trent just said. I mean, he's going to the league. He's a running back. He's a terrific player. Do you think his workload gets curtailed a little bit in the final 2 weeks, just out of caution?
I would doubt that. I think it would be more organic based on the offense as opposed to any kind of specific reasoning. My guess, and this is without talking to him, and I haven't really been all that focused on Iowa for a little while, but is that he's, his last game is going to be against Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's going to go ahead and declare he's a top 40 guy, a top 50 guy at the minimum. And so why risk yourself in a bowl game that has little bearing? I mean, if Kayvon Merriweather can drop out of a bowl, so could Caleb Johnson.
Yeah,
and so my guess, Noah Fant did and everything. So my guess is he drops out of that. But I don't know. The last 2 games, I think he'll play, pedal to the metal. I think Iowa will too. I mean, you want to beat Nebraska. I'm sure you want to beat Brian Ferentz and Maryland on the road and finish strong. And there's a lot, still, and I think Caleb Johnson will want to do that too.
That angle, I'm sure, will be played up. Kirk against his boy, going up against Brian. Have you heard anything at all about Brian, how things have gone out there? He's just an analyst. We're not talking about an on-field coach by any means, but it's certainly not anything that's come across me. Have you heard anything, Brian, and what he's trying to do to, I don't know, repair, I guess, his image and to move up from an analyst role into a full-time coaching role?
Not a whole lot. I mean, part of that is because of where Maryland sits in the standings. Sure. I mean, other than beating USC and they're 4-6 and they have to win their last 2 games against Iowa and at Penn State. So those seem, it seems like a tall task to win out. I mean, I think Iowa maybe be the better opportunity for them. So no, I haven't heard a whole lot out of that. I mean, he's, as an offensive line coach, potentially tight ends coach, he should have a market. His image as an offensive coordinator probably struggle to rehab that, yes. but I would say his ability to coach the offensive line and is, to me, I would hire him yesterday if you're looking for, somebody who could do that, because Lord knows there's probably, 15 offensive line coaches in the Big Ten and 115 around the country who are worse than Brian Ferentz at that position.
Doc, let's look ahead. Indiana, a lot of folks think they're going to get crushed. This is a weekend that a lot of naysayers have had circled on their calendars that this is it. Finally, the train comes to a halt when they head to Columbus. I'm not so sure. I'm really not. Cignetti has done wonders, as everybody knows, with this team. He's the National Coach of the Year. I'd be shocked if he isn't. How do you see Indiana, Ohio State?
I see it very close. Indiana was the best team I've seen in person this year, and that includes Ohio State and Oregon. They're terrific. Now, can the situation get big for them? I mean, that is going to the Death Star is not an easy task for anybody, any team. As we know, Iowa hasn't won there since 1991, and very few teams actually go there and are victorious. I think Michigan State in 15 was the last time somebody actually beat them there, other than Michigan. So it's a tough place to play, and I could see the environment being a little different for anybody, and let alone Indiana. But this is a different Indiana team, and they've got some players. I mean, they've got Curtis Rourke is playing as well as any quarterback in the Big Ten. And in fact, he would be my number 1 in the Big Ten this year. They have a good defense. It's one of the best in the country. I know people will talk about their strength of schedule, but I also kind of turn that and say they beat a team, 56-7 that beat the, co-leader of the Big 12 by 18 points. So this is a pretty good team, and I expect them to be very competitive unless there are turnovers or injuries or something to that effect. I think that they will compete and be in the game in the fourth quarter.
Speaking of being in the game in the fourth quarter, well, the Gophers, as they host Penn State, everybody just got Penn State etched in there. They'll be in the playoff in some spot. Could we be an upset watch this weekend with Minnesota, who, short of that Rutgers game, have been playing much better since we saw them against Iowa?
No question. This is one that Penn State has to be very careful of. They haven't won in Minnesota since 2010. You look at Minnesota position by position. They have a very good left tackle who can compete with Abdul Carter. They have one of the better receivers you don't know, and Daniel Jackson. They have a really good running back, and quarterback Max Rosemer has come along and played really well. Plus, their defense is decent. So, yes, they went and lost at Rutgers, but they also beat Illinois. This is a team if you allow them to dictate tempo in that environment, it can be very challenging. And who knows what the weather holds in Minneapolis? It turns quickly. But I think that if Penn State wins by a point, they should take it, because this is just not one of those games that you say, oh, yeah, it's just little old Minnesota. No, this could be a team that could cause you some problems.
Last thing, 10 seconds. Does Nebraska get bowl eligible this week?
Yes, I think they do. I think they beat them. They end their 10-game losing streak, and they become bowl eligible.
Good stuff. Scott Dochterman for The Athletic. Doc, what have you got coming up this week? Trent and I can look forward to reading.
Yeah, more bowl projections, man. That's been my Monday so far, other than this little news. It's not little to me or anybody else, but about the quarterback. And then also I wrote about Oregon today, doing something that no other realignment team has done before, and that's run the table in their conference in their first year. So
that's Scott Dochterman from The Athletic, talking some Big Ten football, and of course a dive into Iowa football and Cade McNamara. We wrap things up. Iowa Hoops team back on the hardwood tonight. They take on Rider. We talk about the matchup as we continue. Stay right there as we roll through. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Look, I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to crawl through a bed of hot coals just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy. No hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with a purchase of a 3-month plan, I called them on it. Turns out it's really that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. The longest part of the process was the time I had to spend on hold waiting to break up with my old provider. To get started, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. There, you'll see that right now, all 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. All plans come with high-speed data, unlimited talk and text, delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Find out how easy it is to switch to Mint Mobile and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. That's mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speeds slower at 40 GB on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for full details. Trent Condon back with you one final time here, Locked On Hawkeyes. And tonight, the hardwood is the place at Carver Hawkeye Arena. It will not be the environment we saw in Moline. Ryder comes to town. Not J.R. Ryder or Isaiah Ryder. What was the name change? Which way to go? J.R. to Isaiah? I think that's what it was. Regardless, he's not going to be here. It's going to be the team out of Lawrenceville, New Jersey. Now, a season ago, Ryder went 15-17. In the MAC, not the MAC, the Metro Athletic Conference. Not good. It's another bye game. They're decent. They're better than a couple of teams that Iowa's faced so far this season. So they got blitzed in their opener against UCLA. Lost by 35. Since then, they've gone on the road, won at San Diego, won at Coppin State, won at Navy. All road victories. One thing you'll see from this team, they're going to try to chase you off the 3-point line. That's what they're going to do. Pretty good defensive team. So this is going to be a game where probably going to be an inside game. Going to have to see a lot of Owen Freeman like you did against Washington State. That is going to be a big component to this one. Not huge inside. Their center 6'9". They play a 6'6" power forward. So this is going to be a game. But they are a pretty good offensive rebounding team. So they're going to be crashing the boards hard. Good rebounding game. Do your thing and continue to figure out those lineups. Because the most difficult opponent that I was going to face to this point will come up on Friday against Utah State. That's a good Utah State team that they're going to see. So that is what is on tap here tonight. Chance to see Drew Thelwell. Can he continue his emergence at the point guard position? How about Traore? Get more comfortable in there, and we'll see that lineup maybe with him at the 4 a little bit, and can he guard and what he can do defensively. These tune-up matches are going to be important. Can't afford, obviously, to lose one. Iowa at FanDuel, currently favored by 21 in this matchup. That'll be tonight. We'll be back with you late in the evening with a rapid reaction podcast. We will break this one down a little bit deeper and get ready for an important one coming up on Friday against Utah State. The Iowa women, it'll be a neutral court matchup. I mentioned Carver. That's not the case. It's going to be in Sioux Falls on Wednesday as they'll take on Kansas. We'll talk about that game a little bit more. Of course, continue to talk some football here. We got you covered. All angles here at Locked On Hawkeyes. Wrestling, we got the big duel coming up this weekend, Cy-Hawk matchup. We'll get into that as well. Busy time. Absolutely love it. And we got you covered. Your team every day. That's what we do here on the Locked On Network. Locked On Hawkeyes with you each and every day. Don't forget about Locked On Big Ten. Craig Sheeman doing great work over there as well. You can get everything 1 through 18 in the Big Ten, football and basketball with Craig. Locked On Big Ten. You can find it on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. We'll talk to you again here tonight, after the Rider game this evening. We'll get you a rapid reaction podcast to that one. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.